probably qualified to argue housing fewer than half the attorneys who appear. Before me, the packed courtroom was completely silent. Furthermore, Barrett continued, your approach to these properties demonstrates exactly the kind of responsible ownership that housing advocates have been demanding for decades that didn't just fix problems. You studied law to understand how to fix them properly. She picked up her gavel. Then paused. Mr. Springsteen, I have an unusual request. Given your qualifications and your obvious commitment to justice, would you consider serving as a special advisor in this court on housing law cases? We see too many landlords who ignore their responsibilities. Too many tenants who don't understand their rights. Springsteen stood slowly. Your Honor, I would be honored to help in any way I can, Judge. Barrett smiled for the first time that day. Excellent. Now, regarding this case, I'm dismissing charges against Mr. Springsteen. The evidence clearly shows responsible ownership and legal compliance. I'm ordering the plaintiff's attorney to return any fees collected. The tenants in this appearance have filed an investigation. Stood taut, but Barrett cut her off. Miss Chen, you had a responsibility to verify your evidence before filing, to check the dates on those photographs, and to investigate improvement efforts that constitute inadequate preparation. This court will not be used for publicity-seeking lawsuits based on information the section buzzed. With activity as reporters frantically typed on their phones and laptops, Judge Barrett wasn't finished. She turned back to Springsteen's legal team. Mr. Davidson, I'm recommending that the State Bar Association review your handling of in this case. Your client came to court better prepared than his attorney. That's unacceptable. Aired his papers, shaking hands, understanding his reputation had been severely damaged. The news of the hearing spread far beyond the Newark courthouse. Within hours, news outlets across the country were reporting the shocking reversal. The story wasn't just about a celebrity winning a legal case. It was about the power of preparation, the danger of assumptions, and the importance of looking beyond the surface appearances. Experts weighed in on television news programs, praising Springsteen's thorough preparation and criticizing the plaintiff's attorney's inadequate investigation and the defense team for underestimating their own client. But the most powerful reactions came from ordinary people who saw something inspiring in the story. Social media was filled with comments from viewers who felt encouraged to pursue their own educational goals regardless of their age or background. A retired factory worker in Ohio posted, if Bruce Springsteen can go to law school at 60 and finish the college degree I started 40 years ago. A single mother in Texas wrote, this shows that learning never stops. I'm signing up for night classes next semester. The story resonated especially strongly with working-class Americans who had grown up listening to Springsteen's music about dignity being hard work and fighting for justice. Here was proof that their hero practiced what he preached. 3 weeks after the hearing, Judge Barrett called Springsteen to discuss his advisory role, and she thought she had him cornered. Judge Amy Coney Barrett looked across the courtroom at the man in faded jeans and a worn leather jacket, certain this would be an easy victory. The famous rock star had walked into her federal courtroom thinking his celebrity status would protect him, but what happened in the next 30 minutes left everyone speechless, including the judge herself. If you believe that respect should be earned through knowledge and not just position, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Because this story will remind you why you should never judge someone by their appearance or profession. Bruce Springsteen sat quietly at the defendant's table, his weathered hands were folded in front of him. The media had painted this as a simple case of a celebrity trying to avoid responsibility, but they had no idea what was about to unfold in Judge's courtroom that Tuesday morning in Newark, New Jersey. The case had started 6 months earlier when Springsteen's property management company was sued by a group of tenants from a low-income housing complex he owned in Asbury Park. The tenants claimed unsafe living conditions, illegal rent increases, and violations of federal housing laws. The media coverage was brutal. Headlines screamed about the millionaire rock star exploiting the poor, the very people his songs had always championed. Judge Amy Coney Barrett had been assigned to the case. At 52 years old, she was known for her sharp legal mind and no-nonsense approach to celebrity cases. She had made her reputation by treating famous defendants the same as anyone else. sometimes more harshly to make a point about equal justice under law. The courtroom was packed that morning. Reporters filled the gallery with cameras, lined the hallway outside, and legal observers crowded into every available seat. This was the kind of high-profile case that could make careers and destroy reputations. Barrett entered the courtroom with her usual confident stride. She had spent weeks preparing for this case, studying every detail of housing law and tenant rights. She was ready to show that Bruce, despite his fame, would be held accountable for his actions like any other landlord. Springsteen's legal team consisted of 3 expensive attorneys from a prestigious Manhattan firm. They sat beside him in their tailored suits, briefcases full of motions and legal documents. To most observers, it looked like the typical setup of a celebrity using high-priced lawyers for justice, but something seemed different about Springsteen himself. While his lawyers whispered among themselves and shuffled papers, he sat calmly reading from a thick legal textbook, occasionally making notes in the margins when reporters asked him questions outside the courthouse. His answers were unusually detailed and precise, far beyond what most celebrities offered in legal situations. The proceedings began with the plaintiff's attorney presenting in their case. Margaret Chen, a dedicated housing rights lawyer, laid out a devastating picture of neglect and exploitation. She presented photographs of leaking roofs, broken heating, and unsafe electrical wiring. She read testimony from elderly tenants who had lived in fear of eviction after complaining about conditions. Judge Barrett listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence. Chun finished hers. The judge turned to Springsteen's legal team with barely concealed disapproval. "Mr. Davidson," she addressed the lead attorney, "I hope you have a better explanation for your client's conduct than what we've heard so far. These conditions are clearly unacceptable." Davidson, the lead, stood and began what sounded like a standard celebrity defense. He talked about mismanagement by property management companies, lack of direct oversight, and his client's busy touring schedule preventing proper attention to business matters. Judge's patience visibly wore thin. "Mr. Davidson, your client owns these properties. The buck stops with him. Are you telling me this?" Court, that Mr. Springsteen was completely unaware of these conditions, Your Honor. "My client has been focused on his artistic career and, excuse me," the voice came from the defendant's table. Bruce Springsteen had stood up, his hand raised. "Politely, Your Honor. May I address the court directly?" Barrett's eyebrows rose. It was unusual for defendants to speak for themselves when represented by counsel, especially in complex civil cases. Davidson looked alarmed and immediately objected. "Your Honor, the client doesn't need to, Mr. Davidson." Barrett interrupted. "Your client has the right to speak, Mr. Springsteen. You may proceed, but I warn you that anything you say can be used in this proceeding." Springsteen nodded and walked to the podium. He didn't look like the typical defendant. There was no nervousness, no deflection in his manner. Instead, he spoke with quiet confidence. "Your Honor, I want to begin by acknowledging the legitimate grievances of the tenants. Their complaints are real, and their suffering is real, but I believe there are important facts that haven't been presented to this court." Judge Barrett leaned forward, surprised by his directness. "Go on." "The properties in question were purchased by my company in 2019 through a complex foreclosure proceeding. At the time of purchase, we discovered that the previous owner had been operating under a federal consent decree due to systemic housing violations dating back 15 years. Barrett's expression changed slightly. This level of legal detail was unexpected from a rock musician. Springsteen continued under Section 8 of the Housing Act of 1937, as amended, and specifically the housing quality standards outlined in 24 CFR 982.41. We were required to bring these properties into compliance within a specific time frame while maintaining affordable housing for existing tenants. The judge blinked. She had not expected a precise citation of federal housing regulations. Furthermore, Springsteen said consulting his notes on the case of Hills versus Goro established that housing providers in situations like ours have an affirmative duty to remedy past discrimination while ensuring that correctives do not result in tenant displacement. Margaret Chen, the plaintiff's attorney, looked up sharply from her notes. Judge Barrett's face showed growing surprise as Springsteen referenced a landmark Supreme Court housing case with perfect accuracy. "Mr. Springsteen," Barrett said slowly, "are you reading from prepared notes?" "No, Your Honor, I'm speaking from my understanding of housing law, which I've been studying intensively for the past 4 years." Davidson, Springsteen's own attorney, looked as shocked as everyone else in the courtroom. Springsteen reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that hasn't been included in the thief's case. May I approach?" Barrett nodded. Still processing what she was hearing, Springsteen handed her a thick stack of documents. "These are work contracts and inspection reports showing a systematic renovation program that began immediately after we took ownership of the total investment in property improvements have been $2.8 million over 3 years. Judge Barrett flipped through the documents. They were meticulously organized with legal tabs and cross-references that showed sophisticated understanding of evidence presentation. "Your Honor," Springsteen continued, "plaintiff's attorney presented photographs of poor conditions but failed to include the dates when those photographs were taken. I believe the court will find that most were taken during the initial assessment period in 2019, before renovations began." Chin jumped to her feet. "Objection, Your Honor. The defendant is making McKinsey claims as evidence, Mr. Springsteen," Barrett said. "Can you support this assertion?" "Honor." Springsteen returned to his table and brought back another folder. "These are metadata reports from the digital files provided during discovery. The EKF data shows creation dates for the photographs that I had independently verified by a forensic digital analyst." The courtroom fell silent. Barrett examined the technical reports. With growing amazement, the analysis was thorough and professionally done, but Springsteen wasn't finished. "Your Honor, want to address the alleged illegal rent increases under New Jersey's rent stabilization laws, specifically NJSA 2A 42-84A 2A 4284. Increase rents to capital. Improvements to enhance habitability are provided if proper notice is given and the improvements are documented." Presented set of documents. These include improvement schedules, costs, and tenant notifications for each adjustment. Every increase was calculated according to the statutory formula approved by the local rent control judge. Judge Barrett studied the document. Initial defiance began to waver. This was the unprepared celebrity defendant's expected behavior. Furthermore, Springsteen, regarding the claim of conditions, "I want to direct the court's attention to Section 27205 of the New York City Maintenance Code, which has been adopted as a model by New Jersey municipalities. Our properties not only meet these standards, but exceed them in several categories." He produced inspection certificates from 3 independent housing authorities showing compliance, ratings above minimum requirements. Margaret Chin looked increasingly uncomfortable as her supposedly airtight case began showing serious gaps. Judge Barrett set down the documents and looked directly at Springsteen. "Mr. Springsteen, I have to ask, where did you acquire this level of legal knowledge?" Springsteen, I smiled for the first time that day, Your Honor. After I purchased these properties and learned about the housing problems in my community, I realized I needed to understand the law if I was going to make a real difference. I enrolled in Rutgers Law School's part-time evening program 4 years ago. I graduated last month. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Barrett's mouth opened slightly in surprise. "You have a law degree?" "Yes, Your Honor. I specialized in housing and poverty law. My thesis was on the intersection of federal housing policy and local community development." Maintained a 3.8 GPA while continuing to tour and record Davidson. His own attorney looked like he had been struck by lightning. Judge Barrett shook her head slowly. "Mr. Springsteen, why didn't your legal team present this information?" From the beginning, Springsteen glanced at his expensive legal team, then back at the judge. "Your Honor, with respect to my counsel, I think they assumed that having a famous client meant focusing on public relations rather than legal preparation. They advised me to stay quiet and let them handle everything." The judge turned to Davidson with a stern expression. "Mr. Davidson, is this true?" Davidson stood awkwardly. "Your Honor, we felt that a traditional defense strategy would be effective by hiding the fact that your client is legally qualified to defend himself and has documentary evidence supporting his position." Barrett's voice carried a sharp edge. What happened next stunned everyone. In the courtroom, Judge Barrett called for a brief recess to review all the new evidence. When court resumed, her entire demeanor had changed after reviewing the evidence. Enticed by Mr. Springsteen, she began this. The court finds significant problems with the plaintiff's case. The photographic evidence appears to be outdated and potentially misleading. The rent increase allegations are contradicted by official municipal approvals, and most importantly, documented improvement efforts show a pattern of responsible ownership rather than neglect. Margaretchen tried to interject, but Barrett continued. However, this case has revealed something far more troubling than housing violations. Mr. Davidson, your representation of your client has been inadequate to the point of potential malpractice. You failed to present crucial evidence. You mischaracterized your client's qualifications, and you advised him to remain silent when he was clearly the most knowledgeable person in this courtroom about the relevant law. Davidson's face went pale. Judge Barrett turned back to Springsteen. Mr. Springsteen, I owe you an apology. Why? I came into this courtroom with preconceptions about celebrity defendants. You were using expensive lawyers to avoid responsibility for legitimate housing violations. I find that revealed even more about his commitment to housing justice. Bruce, she said, using his first name for the first time, I've been thinking about your case. You could have hired investigators to dig up the same evidence you presented, and you could have had your lawyers do the legal research. Why did you go to law school yourself? Springsteen's answer captured the essence of why the story had touched so many people. Judge Barrett, I realized years ago that writing songs about working people's struggles wasn't enough. If I really wanted to help, I needed to understand the systems that create those struggles. You can't fight injustice effectively if you don't understand how justice is supposed to work. He paused. Then he continued, too many people in my position think they can solve problems by writing checks or making speeches, but real change requires real knowledge. Requires doing the work, not just talking about it. Over the following months, Springsteen's advisory work with the court led to significant improvements in how housing cases were handled. He helped develop a mediation program that resolved disputes before they went to trial, saving time and money for both landlords and tenants. He also established a legal clinic that provided free housing law education to both property owners and renters, helping them understand their rights and responsibilities before problems developed. The impact extended beyond housing law. Schools across the country reported increased enrollment in their evening and part-time programs, with many applicants citing Springsteen's example as inspiration. Margaretchen, the plaintiff's attorney who had brought the original case, eventually apologized publicly for her inadequate preparation. She implemented new procedures in her practice to ensure thorough investigation before filing lawsuits. David Davidson, Springsteen's original attorney, faced disciplinary action from the state bar but used the experience to reform his own practice, focusing more on thorough preparation and less on celebrity clients. Judge Amy Coney Barrett later reflected on the case, calling it one of the most educational experiences of her judicial career. I learned that day that expertise can come from unexpected places, she said. Bruce taught me that you should never assume someone's capabilities based on their profession or public image. Some of the best legal minds I've encountered have been people who came to law from other careers, bringing real-world experience that pure academics can't provide. The case became a teaching examples in law schools used to illustrate the importance of thorough preparation, the dangers of assumptions, and the value of client collaboration representation. But perhaps the most lasting impact was the reminder that learning and growth don't stop at any particular age or stage of life. Springsteen's decision to pursue legal education in his 60s inspired countless people to challenge themselves intellectually, regardless of their circumstances. The final lesson was about respect and dignity. Judge Barrett had initially looked at Springsteen as an atypical celebrity trying to avoid responsibility. Springsteen could have looked at the tenants' complaints as nuisances to be handled by expensive lawyers. Instead, he learned to see beyond surface appearances to find truth and justice. The story spread because it represented something people wanted to believe about America, that hard work and genuine preparation still matter. Justice can prevail when people do their homework and realize that it's never too late to learn something new and make a real difference in the world. If this story inspired you to never judge someone by their appearance or to pursue learning, regardless of your age, Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share stories that remind us of the values that truly matter, preparation, and the courage to keep growing throughout our lives. What did you think of Judge Barrett's transformation in this case? Let us know in the comments below.